I'm not sure if I've got enough laptops for this laptop buying guide video. But the truth is, buying a new laptop isn't easy. There's so many things to consider, it can get a bit confusing. You could just jump on Amazon and type in laptop and then filter by price, size, and customer rating. But if you're spending hundreds or even thousands of pounds on a new laptop, you want to make sure you're getting the right one for you and it's good value for money. So I'm going to walk you through 10 things that you need to know in order to choose the perfect laptop for you. And I've put links to some of my recommended laptops in the description below this video. So first things first, do you prefer using Windows, Mac OS, or Chrome OS? There's no right or wrong answer, and it's usually best to stick with what you know. Windows is by far the most common platform, so you've got the greatest range of laptops to choose from. Mac OS is obviously exclusive to Apple MacBooks and MacBook Pros, which are beautiful machines and really easy to use, but they're also relatively expensive, there isn't much variety, and the latest models have a limited range of ports. Chromebooks running Chrome OS are very popular with students, so if you're on a budget and just doing really basic things like Google Docs, streaming Netflix, and sending emails, a Chromebook could be ideal. Personally though, I tend to prefer going for a Windows 10 laptop because there's just so much choice, and it means I can pay what I want and get the specs and the features I need. And if you're into gaming, Windows machines are pretty much your only option right now, although click at the top right to see my video on how game streaming on PC and Mac could be the future. Okay, next question. Do you want a traditional clamshell laptop like this? That's the most common kind of laptop, doesn't open any further than that, sometimes can be a touchscreen, or would you prefer something a little more fancy, like a convertible 2-in-1 with a 360-degree hinge, so you can turn the screen right round and use it as a tablet, or you can put it in tent mode, I'm not sure who really does that, or stand mode, which is handy if you're watching movies or something, maybe on a plane. You basically get a touchscreen tablet experience, but all in one laptop, thanks to that 360 hinge. So these are convertible 2-in-1s. Or the third choice is a hybrid 2-in-1 with a fully detachable keyboard. So you've got slightly more budget options like this Acer Switch 3, so you can just pull it off like that, and you've got the keyboard and tablet separately. That's very similar to the Surface Pro. Or on the higher end of the scale, I've got the Surface Book 2 here, it's the 13-inch one, and I can press a button, hopefully, yep, and the tablet is released from the keyboard. And that way you can use it either as a normal laptop, or you can take it off and use it as a full Windows 10 tablet. There are downsides to these though. Generally, 2-in-1 devices are more expensive than a similarly spec'd normal laptop, and quite often they won't be as powerful due to size and design restrictions. That's not always the case though. Going back to the Surface Book 2, it's one of the most powerful non-gaming laptops you can buy right now, but the compromise is the price. It starts at 1,500 quid for this 13-inch model. The one actually I've got here is 2,500. For the 15-inch model, well, it's even more expensive. So when it comes to power versus portability versus price, low price, generally you can only get 2 out of 3. Now let's talk about size, because most laptops have 13, 14, or 15-inch screen sizes. You do get a few 11-inch budget laptops and some huge 17 or 18-inch gaming beasts, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. Generally, as you'd expect, the smaller the screen size, the lighter and more compact it is. So 13 and 14-inch Ultrabooks, which is just a fancy name for thin and light laptops that use Intel chips, make great travel companions. Anything bigger and you'll struggle to get any work done on trains or planes. But bigger 15-inch laptops like this can be more powerful. Often there's room for a dedicated graphics card, and they can use more power-hungry processors. But the good news is that brands are putting bigger screens into more compact and travel-friendly bodies by trimming the size of the bezel around the screen. So if you're going to leave your laptop at home or in the office, you may as well go for something a bit bigger and therefore hopefully a bit more powerful. But if you want something that's good on the road and you'll barely feel in your backpack, then maybe consider a 13-inch Ultrabook like one of these. But if you can afford it, a high-end MacBook Pro 15, XPS 15 or Surface Book 2 15 are relatively compact for their size and offer really high-end performance. The whole time you're using your laptop, you're looking at the screen, so you want to make sure it looks good. Firstly, make sure it's got an IPS screen. You can check the tech specs or reviews to see if IPS is mentioned, as they offer much better color accuracy and viewing angles. The alternative is a TN screen, which is still used on some cheaper models and is okay, but it can look grainy and viewing angles are pretty terrible. You should also consider the screen's resolution, but don't worry about this too much. Ideally, go for a laptop with a full HD, so that's a 1920 by 1080 resolution. Even though everyone's talking about 4K, unless it's a 15-inch or bigger laptop and you really want those extra pixels for watching 4K movies or if you're editing 4K video, I'd avoid it as it has a big impact on your battery life and your frame rate in games, and it's unlikely you'll really notice the difference. If you thought this video couldn't get any more exciting, you were wrong, because now we're going to talk about tech specs, which actually, as dull and complicated as it can be, is super important for knowing what kind of performance you're going to get from a laptop. So there's three main things to consider: the processor, the RAM, and the storage. And maybe also graphics cards if you're into gaming or you run more intensive workstation applications. The most important thing is the processor. You'll see most mid-range or high-end laptops come with an Intel Core i3, i5, or i7 processor. Generally, higher the number, the better the performance you get. Unless you're doing lots of photo or video editing or more intensive tasks, a Core i5 will be just fine. But also look for what generation it is. Every year these chips get refreshed and improved, with the latest 8th generation processors now offering 4 cores rather than 2, which is better for multitasking. 7th generation chips are still fine. I still use this Dell XPS 15, but where possible, try and get the latest one. Some cheaper laptops will come with a Pentium or a Celeron processor, but unless you're using it for more basic tasks or you're on a super tight budget, I'd try to avoid these as a rule of thumb. And then we've got RAM, which is much easier. Usually you'll get 4, 8, or 16 gigabytes of RAM in a laptop. Again, unless you're going for a basic machine, I'd avoid 4 gigs. The sweet spot is 8 gigabytes. For video editing, rendering, or any sort of power user, go for 16 gigs where possible. And finally, in terms of specs, let's talk about storage. And I can't emphasize this enough, how important an SSD or solid state drive in your laptop is. It makes a huge difference just to how fast everything feels, from boot times, opening programs, generally using the desktop. I really do highly recommend making sure your new laptop comes with an SSD. Some laptops have both, like a 32 or 128 gigabyte SSD, and then a second higher capacity hard drive. That's fine too, and is arguably the best of both worlds. You get the SSD speed boost for Windows, but you also get enough storage for all your files. But let's keep things simple. If you've got a budget of say 500 to 1000, look for a laptop that has an Intel Core i3 or i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and at least a 256GB storage SSD. Over 1000, and then you can start looking at i5 and i7 processors, up to 16 gigs of RAM, and maybe a 512GB storage SSD. But if you're on a tight budget, under 500 or 600, maybe consider something that has a Core i3, or if you're really pushed, maybe an Intel Celeron or Pentium processor. This Asus Switch 3 has a Pentium, and it's fine because it's backed up by an SSD. It's got 32GB of flash storage, and that, for basic Windows tasks, makes the biggest difference in terms of performance and how fast everything feels. Now let's move on to gaming, because while that lot will play some games maybe at lower to medium settings if you drop the resolution, if you want to play games seriously and up the res, up the graphics, have higher frame rates, you're going to want to look into a gaming laptop. This is the HP Omen X I've got here. And these generally come with an i7 processor, 16 gigs of RAM, and importantly, a dedicated graphics card. While this is going to be ideal for gaming, there is a halfway house between someone who wants a powerful but still portable laptop and someone who just wants the best gaming performance possible. And you can still get dedicated graphics cards in laptops like these. The Dell XPS 15 I've got here, or the Surface Book 2, they both come with an NVIDIA GTX 1050. So look for either NVIDIA GTX or AMD RX or AMD Vega branding on a laptop. That means it has a dedicated graphics card, which will make your laptop a lot more powerful and capable of playing games with higher settings and at higher resolutions. I will be making a separate video all about gaming laptops, so make sure you click that subscribe button and also click that notification bell, or tap it if you're on a phone, so you don't miss that. USB, HDMI, card readers, ports are really important, and to be honest, all I would recommend is making sure the laptop you get comes with at least one USB 3.1 Type-C port. It is still relatively new, but it can do pretty much everything and will definitely future-proof your laptop. But even if the specs and the price and the size, everything is right, if the keyboard and the touchpad are rubbish, then it's not going to be very nice to use. In my experience, MacBooks and MacBook Pros have the best touchpads. They're big, responsive, and there's great gesture support in macOS. For Windows laptops, try and get one with a Microsoft Precision touchpad. This basically guarantees the touchpad will be fast and precise. If you're not sure if it's got one, just Google the laptop's name along with Precision touchpad and see if any reviews mention it. Don't worry too much if it doesn't have one, although I would recommend then maybe trying it in the store before you buy it. And it's the same with the keyboard. It's very difficult to describe a keyboard other than saying it's responsive or clacky or spongy in a video like this. So I would definitely recommend going to try it in person, because keyboards are very tricky to talk about. A lot of people use key travel, how far the key goes in essentially, as a differentiator between quality, but that's not always the case. And the latest keyboards, say on the MacBook Pros, have very, very minimal key travel, but are still very good, so it's not a great indicator. But what about battery life? How long should your laptop last? Well, anything quoted above 6 hours is decent, but since most brands test them at low brightness, if a retailer says 6 hours, you can expect more like 4 in the real world. The size of the battery, 4K resolution screens, graphics cards, and older generation processors have the biggest impact on battery life. Most reviews you read will tell you how long a laptop lasts, but if you can get one with at least 6 hours, but preferably 8 to 10 hours, then that'll do nicely. If you're still here, I'm very, very impressed, because that was a lot to take in, and I appreciate you sticking with me. Hopefully that's made things a little bit clearer. Now you know what to look for when you go out and buy a new laptop. I will put links to my recommended laptops in the description below for all sorts of different budgets, and I will keep them updated as well with the latest models as they come out. And if you've got any other questions, or if you've got some laptop buying advice of your own that maybe I've missed, put it in the comments below and then we can share it with everyone. And if you want to see more of these types of videos, tap that like and subscribe button below. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.